Hey everybody, today we're going over cardiovascular training, what that means, what that looks like, and things of that nature. So obviously my name is John Brown, and before I get too deep into it, let's go over who I am and what about me next. So about me, owner and founder of Empirical Fitness, based in Austin, Texas. These are ways to contact me, reach out to me, so on and so forth. And I keep shouting out this Facebook group because obviously I manage it and created it. Nerds Who Lift Weights. If you are a nerd and you like to lift weights, definitely go check out my Facebook group. We talk about nerdy stuff and fitness stuff in there. So, first thing is like, what is aerobic training? What is cardiovascular training? Obviously, it's a physical activity. It often involves continuous movement. So, aerobic training, like what comes to your mind, like probably is like maybe biking, maybe skating, maybe jump roping. Dancing technically is an aerobic activity. The main difference or the main thing of all those things that you want to think about is like, yes, lifting weights is a continuous activity. You're in the gym for like an hour, but like essentially you're not doing lunges for an hour straight, right? Technically, walking would be more of the continuous activity than lifting because like I said, you're not lifting for an hour straight with no breaks. And the last thing that you want to focus on with your aerobic training is your heart rate focus. And essentially all that means is once again, you're just focus on your heart rate while doing your continuous movement and physical activity. Why is cardio important? Well, you have your cardiovascular health, right? And the two pieces or two components you need to look out for and or care about during this training or why this training is your heart and your lungs. So your heart and lungs do two important things. Your lungs first, we'll start there, are responsible for gas exchange. So you have oxygen and CO2 are the two components that your lungs should deal with. There are other gases in the air, but those are the things, those are the byproducts and the thing we need. Oxygen versus CO2. Or oxygen is not the byproduct. Oxygen is what we need. CO2 is a byproduct. Okay, cool. Moving on. That gas exchange happens in the lungs, and the lungs can adapt essentially uh, over time and via aerobic training. Your lungs will actually alter the way that how to say they become more efficient in their gas exchange. The heart is more of a muscle. The heart will essentially contract harder and more powerfully with regards to each beat per minute to get more blood throughout the rest of your body. Uh, and so that's why those two things are important. So your heart essentially contracts, boom, sends blood throughout the body, including, so you have your right ventricle, and I'm doing this because this is how I remembered it in college. Your right ventricle, when looking at the heart, is not on the right side. So you have your right ventricle and left ventricle. Your right ventricle is meant to send blood to the lungs, if I remember correctly, and your left ventricle, which is bigger, a lot bigger, is meant to send blood after going to the heart to the rest of the body. But yeah, I'm not going to do any like major heart anatomy lessons today. But if you're interested in that, obviously let me know in the comments. Uh, if not, just know that yes, that's how it works. Your right ventricle sends blood to the lungs, left ventricle sends blood to the body. Left ventricle is much bigger. Blood goes by the lungs to get oxygenated before coming back to the heart and then going back to the rest of the body. The lungs can adapt in the sense that they can get better and more efficient at gas exchange via like these like air compartments. So essentially, like you have like your trachea and like they branch off to your bronchi and then like they become bronchioles, alveoli, yada yada yada. Those are all like essentially different organelles, not organelles in the cell, different parts of the lung with different functions that help with gas exchange. Heart rate training. So your heart rate versus your intensity, right? So the more intense the exercise, the higher your heart rate. There's a direct correlation. And you're like, John, but like, here's an example I've talked about probably about my friend who runs marathons. She ran for an hour and 15 minutes while in zone five, like 175 beats per minute for over an hour and 15 minutes. That's crazy. So you're like, how can you maintain that intensity for that long? That's a health risk. I mean, you should have done that. Zone five is not meant to be done for that long or that intensity. But B, you're essentially not supposed to. Your longer distance activities should be done at a lower heart rate and then at a lower intensity. The more intense your activity is, the shorter in duration it should be, are the things you can like essentially think about. Uh, your muscles have adaptations during heart rate training. So essentially, let's say if you start to train in your aerobic zone, the capillaries surrounding your muscles that oxygenate your muscles will become more dense or kind of more not more dense. You'll get more of them to allow for easier, more efficient gas exchange when it comes to muscles. And that's like your specifically aerobic training. Let's say you're training like threshold, you're training at more into higher intensities. Whenever you're doing that and you're training at those higher intensities, your body starts to produce hydrogen ions and lactate, and then you're both the hydrogen ions and lactate kind of create like that burning feeling you feel in your muscles for extended period of time or for the time or duration that you were doing the activity. And your body can become more adaptive to not letting those metabolites essentially affect it adversely, or the impact that it does have, they can lessen how bad the backlash will be. And lastly, fuel sources for your heart rate training. I've done a presentation about why fuel sources are so important and how that kind of can vary based off how you're training. I'll probably link that presentation to this one so you guys can, it'll probably be somewhere on the screen. So you guys can know like how best to do that. But essentially, the higher the intensity of the activity, the more you will have to go from fats to carbs in order to see the success you want to see or to perform at the highest level. Once again, higher intensity, more carbs, lower intensity, more fat versus carbs. Training zones. So these are the training zones that people often like talk about. And granted, um, I'll kind of get into like these different training zones, why they're important, just a second. But like, most people like the zone right here, I have a very separation based off like between zone one and two. Both of those don't have very good like aerobic adaptation. So most of the people use like whenever they refer to their zones, like zone five, zone one and two are like the same thing essentially. It's not much benefit. Um, versus like zone three, your aerobic zone, like that's going to start getting to those adaptations that I talked about earlier, as far as like capillary density increase, maybe mitochondrial density increase, better gas exchange, yada yada yada. Zone four and five, that's where you're going to get like VO2 max improvement or like lactate threshold training. But yeah, these are like the different zones. I'm going to talk to you guys about each of these and what it means in just a second. But yeah, training zones. Boom. So zone one and two, very light. We're talking up to 65% of your maximum heart rate. Like being in here, like if you think not like hardcore flow yoga, but like iso hold yoga, recovery yoga, passive stretching. These activities keep your heart rate like in like let's say zone one. Um, a leisurely bike ride with your family probably goes up to zone two. You're not trying to break any records or anything like that. These while training or performing activities in these zones, one and two, up to 65%, the main fuel source that you'll be using for this activity is fat as fuel. You won't be using very little carbs. Now, obviously, if you get up real fast, like that's not or have to do like a quick sprint, or you try to go off a jump just because you randomly saw one while you're on your leisurely bike ride with your family. There may be some carb used for that, but once again, after you calm back down and kind of get back in leisure state, majority fat. These are the main benefits in this phase. Ooh, and important to note, Different people will argue different um, percentages as far as like their physical activity and what zone you'll be in and how that breaks it up. This is what I use personally for my zones based on the research that I've done and what I've seen. My zone one and zone two is up to 65%. Now, keep in mind, when you talk to most athletes in their training, they say they do zone two training. And by zone two, their zone two starts at like your 65% because that's where the aerobic benefits start, right? Most athletes aren't looking for promoting, okay, depending on your sport. If you're an aerobic athlete, you're not looking for strictly fat burning or recovery, you're looking for the aerobic adaptation. Zone three, this is your aerobic zone. So this is 65 to 75% of your maximum heart rate. A moderate intensity, you should be able to just do this for like 30 minutes to an hour without feeling essentially dead. Um, People often refer to this as like steady state. This you can do this swimming, you can do this running, you can do this on a bike. You might even be able to do it jump roping. I've never tried it personally, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. Skating, skiing, so on and so forth. So you have options as far as your aerobic zone and activities and how you can do your training. Keep in mind, some activities are easier and or more difficult based off your athleticism, how you're built. For example, I will never be a steady state swimmer. I'm too dense. I don't float. It's not a fun activity for me unless maybe I got like some flippers on, right? So highly don't recommend swimming for someone like me. You could have been a high school or college swimmer. You could love swimming, and swimming may not affect you in the slightest. I just know for me, that's not the thing. So highly recommend that you find a aerobic activity that works best for you, that keeps your heart rate, your zone three heart rate between 65 to 75% of your maximal heart rate. Threshold training. So this is between like, which is zone four, which is between like 75 to like 85% of like your maximum heart rate. It's very intense. It's near lactate threshold. So that means like kind of right under it, right before it, or kind of right above it. As far as like what's going on with your lactate and your lactate threshold, essentially, whenever you do like intense activity, eventually lactate leaves the cell and kind of gets into the bloodstream a little bit. And that's when your body's training having to fight the acidity within your blood, which is like a hard thing for it to do, which is why lactate training is so difficult and takes a longer time to recover from. Doing this improves like your speed, whatever activity you're trying to do. So if you're a runner, skater, skier, rower, so on and so forth. Good thing, improves anaerobic capacity. That's your ability to work anaerobically, which means without air. You're like, John, are you holding your breath while you're doing your lactate threshold? No. But essentially, what anaerobic capacity or anaerobic training means is that you're currently not getting enough oxygen to keep your lactate low. Uh, so you're essentially in like an oxygen deficit at this time with the level of intensity that you're training. A really good example would be a tempo run. For example, if you're a marathon runner, running above your marathon pace would be example of a tempo run, which would be example of like anaerobic training because you're going to do that for a duration. That's not like a short run for you. It might be a mile, it might be 3 miles, depending on how what your tempo is or what you're trying to use. Zone five is your maximum effort. It is extremely intense. You're talking Deadpool. This is going to improve your VO2 max. It's going to improve your maximum speed slash power. This is like a very good example. This is all out sprinting. The 40-yard dash probably isn't great for improving your all out sprinting because it's a very short assessment. Your 100 meter would be like a really would be I would say would be like a better example. Your 200, so on and so forth, because it's maximal speed, maximum effort for a duration of depending how fast you are, like let's say 10 to 24 seconds or whatever would be example of like the maximum effort you're booking as hard as you can. Most people can maintain this zone five like highest end effort um, for like up to like 30 seconds. Like now, granted, no one's going to hold their 100-meter pace for 30 seconds, but someone could run at above. 90% essentially for 30 seconds. Um, for a lot of people working like their VO2 max, like trying to improve that. Like one of the best workouts out there is like 4 minutes on at like as hard as you can go, 4 minutes, 4 minutes off, like equal work to rest. Very painful, but very effective for improving your VO2 max. So what zone should you train in? The answer to that is obviously it depends. Um, but it will vary based off what your training looks like, how you've been training, how long you've been training, and what your goal is. For example, if you're running a marathon, you should be training in a lot of zone two. There will be times where you get both your lactate, your zone four, and zone five in, but those workouts, as far as the time you spend working out, will be a lot less than your zone two training. Your zone two training, if you're running a marathon, 5K, 10K should be the majority of what you're doing. And now, even if you're an athlete, like well, I've talked to one of my BJJ clients today, and I talked about like for 3 to 4 months out of the year, we should probably spend a decent amount of time like in your zone two, or I call it zone two because once again, zone two is when you start getting aerobic benefits on the scale that most people use as far as athletes. So for this presentation, for purposes of this zone three, we should spend like 3 to 4 months in that because we're going to increase your aerobic density or your capillary density, your mitochondrial density. You'll be able to recover faster in between rounds. You'll be able to recover faster at tournaments and things of that nature. Because the sport of BJJ, guys, it's grappling, it's throwing, it's a lot of anaerobic stuff. The rounds aren't that long, but once again, the higher your aerobic base, the higher you faster you recover, and the more things you'll get done in that way. And because you're essentially more aerobic, you'll have higher success. Now, only 4 months out of the year. Why? Because the rest of the year we'll probably do focus on more anaerobic, more interval kind of stuff. That interval work will help maintain your aerobic base. So essentially, because your heart is still pumping hard, you're still doing things that elevate your heart rate. It's adaptations can be sustained easier than they are acquired. Acquisition of an adaptation requires intention and focus and duration in that space. Maintenance of it doesn't have to be a so. For example, a lot of people can maintain strength from just 1 to 2 workouts a week of a lot lower intensity than what it took to acquire those gains. But yeah, so as far as where you're at, I recommend that everyone should be training more aerobically, regardless of what your sport, activity, or exercise, or whatever you're trying to do. Training in that aerobic zone will help improve your ability to your stamina and your endurance, which most people need in whatever sport that they're doing. Except if your sport is lifting, then that's like a different story. Doing some zone two training could be good enough for that, but not like a bunch. Optimal gains. Once again, you want aerobic base, you want to make sure you hit every zone. You don't need to hit every zone every workout. What I mean by that is in a week's time, let's say, depending on what your activity is, let's say 60% of your training is in zone two. The 40% should be in or sorry, zone three for your aerobic zone. The rest of the 40% could be at like lactate threshold. It could be at at your zone five, like maximal effort. Like it really just depends on what your thing is. But the one key thing that works across all strength conditioning, all performance, all improvements as far as adaptations is progressive overload. So over the course of 4 months, like I talked to my client about it, I was like, let's start with a lower base. You hop on a bike, you train your aerobic zone for 20 minutes, 4 days a week. And we do that for like 2 to 3 weeks. And over time, because it could knock him on his ass. He just has my BJ client has a baby, like newborn, like a couple months old. So he's not getting like the optimal sleep, so on and so forth. So performance is like kind of on the back burner. But using progressive overload, like I said, we'll keep it within 20 minutes, like 4 or 5 days a week. Try that for a couple weeks, see how you respond. Then we expand that window. Maybe instead of 4 to 5 times a week, at 20 minutes, we do 25 minutes of those 4 to 5 times a week. Then we go to 30 minutes and then 40 minutes and just trying to keep expanding that time in that zone to keep getting better and better adaptations. Once again, prescription will vary based off your athleticism, the sport you're trying to do, and how intense your training and what else you've got going on. But keep in mind, once again, your base of operations, what you're starting from and gaining from and growing from, is zone 3 aerobic training. So, guys, contact. If you want to be a guest on my podcast, I'm looking for more guests. Shoot me an email at empiricalfitnessgym.com. That's my social media, quadfather_77, Instagram, TikTok, yada yada. And of course, you join my Facebook group if you're a nerd and you love to lift weights. This is me at a coastal rowing regatta, my first one. I didn't do well that time, but they got this cool photo of me because I sprinted really hard. I dove, smashed the button, but I sprinted so hard and dove so hard that when I hit it, I just like kept sliding. I was like, no, and I had no idea if the button stopped. They saw me hit it, so they stopped the timer, even though like I hit it so hard it popped out of the sand. It was rough. But yeah, guys, thanks for hanging out with me and watching this presentation. I hope it was fun and informative. If you have questions about aerobic training zones, if you want to be on this podcast, you have a suggestion for the podcast, leave a comment or send me an email. Right now, one of the names that we're kind of working with is the Quadcast, but maybe we'll stay with that. Maybe we won't. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.